All right. So hopefully you guys can hear me. All right, so we're gonna get started. I'm gonna switch over to my monitor view. All right, guys. So here we are in Blender. Last week we were talking about modularity. We were talking about how to take an image, right? If you remember, take a reference image and start breaking it down and looking at where each of those modules were. So I basically took this into a drawing application. I traced this in red. I traced each of my desks in red, each of the floor panels, or every like column or section of wall that I found could be repeatable. I captured that, right, so that I could make sure those were the nodes or the components that I modeled in order to make a modular kit. Okay, and then we were going to make a desk together. I ended up kind of doing that after the class, but in class we took a look at UV unwrapping. And I hope that, for the most part, that's a little bit clearer now. We can do a recap today and just kind of go through that process so you guys, again, get a better and better sense of what UV unwrapping looks like and how that kind of adds to our pipeline and how it allows us to kind of apply really interesting, unique textures to different aspects of our geometry. Towards the end of today's class, I'd like to also talk about some alternate texturing tools. So I showed you guys how we can texture in Photoshop and bring the texture data back into Blender. I also briefly showed you how you can texture directly in Blender, but there are other programs that are specialized on the texturing process. You may or may not have heard of the Substance Designer suite. So Substance Designer, Substance Painter, applications like that, which allow us to do really nice, beautiful, sometimes realistic textures on our geometry. So we'll take a look at that as well today. I don't expect that you will use those tools, but some of you probably will want to. But I do want you guys to be aware of it, just so you have a better framework of understanding of how people make these assets for games and TV shows and movies. All right, so I'm gonna move this off here. Okay, so let's kind of like back up. So I made these desks because I have a classroom scene that I need, and I made floor tiles, wall tiles that can be reused. So we want to talk about like how to kind of set up a modular scene with textures and everything like that. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Let's back up. I can potentially reuse this desk later, but let's do our own. So I'm going to save this. We'll go new. All right. So I have a brand new scene here. I'm just going to clear everything. A to select everything. X to delete. All right. And any questions again, guys, just let me know. So I'm going to start off with a ground tile. So I'm going to basically make a ground tile. I'll make some wall tiles. I'll probably do some kind of baseboard, a door frame, a series of windows, or a window, maybe some kind of ceiling light fixture or something like that. So I'll just make all the elements that I need for my room, like the actual room, and then I can start thinking about like the set dressing stuff after. So the set dressing, what I mean by that is the tables, chairs, desks, bookshelves, books, things like that. All right, so let's just start. I'll press Shift A here. I'll add a mesh, like so. And actually, if you guys remember, last year, my introduction for you guys to Blender was using Grease Pencil. And Grease Pencil is powerful for 2D animation, of course, or illustration. But it's also really powerful for planning purposes. I could use grease pencil just to plan and plot out my scene, what different elements I want to have, approximately how big they should be, etc. Those kinds of things. So we can kind of look at what that process would look like as well. But right now I'm just going to start with a basic plane. Okay, and I'll have this be like the starting of my floor plane. So by default, when you start make an object in Blender, its dimensions will be 2 meters by 2 meters, potentially by 2 meters. In the case of this plane, it doesn't have a height, so it's 2 meters by 2 meters by 0 meters, right? If I were to make a cube, it would be 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters, and it would be centered on the 0, 0, 0 point in the world. Okay, so it'll extend 1 meter above the 0 point, 1 meter below, 1 meter to the left, 1 meter to the right, 1 meter deep, and 1 meter in front. So anyways, when we make modular elements, generally speaking, we want the measurements to be square. So we want, not square, but like, sorry, we want integers here. So I want this to be like a whole number. I don't want a fraction or anything like that, because it's going to make it harder for me to tile. If I look at this grid here on the ground, I want whatever kind of modular pieces I make to snap perfectly to that grid structure. Okay, so just be mindful of the size. It's arbitrary to some extent. You can choose how big or small you want your modular pieces to be, your chunks to be. But my big recommendation to you is make sure that they snap properly to the grid size of your environment, of your world. And I'm going to turn my camera off here, guys. All right. So another thing we can do, not necessary, but sometimes helpful, we can turn snapping on. So again, to turn on and off snapping, we can either go up to the magnet here up top, or you can press Shift Tab to toggle that on and off. And we can click on here and set the snapping increment, snapping to whatever we want. I'm going to set it to increment and absolute grid snap. Okay. All right. So I'm going to just, with this plane that I created, I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'll press G. I can press Shift Z to snap it or to move it on the horizontal plane. Okay, and I'll just snap it there so that the origin is now in the corner of that geometry. If I come out of edit mode, then I have this this plane here, and the pivot point is right where I want it to be. All right. Now again, by default in Blender, when you create a new object, it's going to automatically try to do some UVs for you. This is just on primitive objects that you create. So if I look at here, if I turn this into a UV image editor window and tab into here, so I can see that the UVs are already there. They're already fully aligned to the boundaries of my UV space. This is a square. Looks like a square, so I'm actually in really good shape. This is perfect for me at this point. Okay, let's start by adding a simple texture to this. So I'm going to go into Photoshop. Just waiting for Photoshop to start. Incidentally, bit of an aside, but I've recently discovered a program called Affinity Designer for iPad, and I'm really impressed with it. I'm really like blown away with it. It's a vector-based drawing application, but really nice to work with, really fluid and intuitive to use. I strongly recommend it to anybody who's got an iPad. Okay, so here we have Photoshop. Okay, so I'm just gonna go File, New, and I want my texture size, doesn't have to be that big. We can make it, say, 512 by 512. Okay, 512 pixels by 512 pixels. Go ahead and create that. Okay, we want to create a ground tile. So I'm just going to double click on this background layer to get rid of the lock, turn that into layer 0. And I want this to look like a classroom ground tile, so it's actually going to be pretty simple. If I look at a classroom floor tile, we get different options. I'm picturing something kind of like this, you know, something very subtle. We got these speckles, or something where we have like some very, very kind of harmonious kind of texture to it, or variety to it. Nothing super crazy. I don't want this to draw a whole lot of attention. So I'm just going to go into my brush settings here. Let's change my brush. Okay, let's tweak our color. Just get my color wheel. Okay, we just had like a few little specks and spots and, you know, different things like that. And then that was the key. If you remember back to last year, hopefully you do. You can also do this in Krita, by the way, using wrap mode, but in Photoshop, if you remember how to do it, we go to filter, we can go to other, we can go to offset. I want to offset this image by half. Okay, so half of 250 or 512 is 256. So I'm going to offset it horizontally and vertically by that, and I'm going to be able to paint out these seams. So if this was to kind of hook up to itself, we can kind of get rid of this. I will actually want to have a seam here, just because you know, in the examples that I showed, there's usually some kind of a seam. And I actually think I want to have, if I think about the size of those tiles in real life, they're pretty small. Let's say maybe even a foot by a foot. So I'd probably have 3 by 3. So 3 by 3. Let me just quickly check, do some calculations here. It's 512 divisible by 3. Not quite. Okay, so we'll just kind of cheat it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go in here. Oh, so this actually should be divisible. I'm going to try dividing this by 6. And it probably won't work either. No. Alright, but I want 6 divisions because 1 meter is 3 feet approximately. So what I'm going to do is I'll just get a halfway. Actually, what I can do, I know what to do. So I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences. I'm going to go to Guides, Grids, and Slices. I'm going to go to grid line every 256 pixels. Okay, and then within that I'm going to have 2 subdivisions. And now I'll turn on my grid. Oops, that didn't work. Preferences, guide, grids and slices. Let's set this to 3 subdivisions. So what am I doing here? Every grid line, okay. So 256 pixels. So 256, this is 512 total. So 256 is gonna be halfway. So it's gonna do a thick line there, and then each of these cells, each of these quads or quadrants that I've set up is going to be further subdivided into 3 components. So what I'll do is I'll just use this. My line should snap to these. I'll use these basically for the floor divisions. Okay. And this will make sense hopefully shortly when I bring this back into Blender. So we have this, and I'm going to go to filter offset. So I could just do this again and it'll put it back to its original location. And you'll notice I don't have a very thick vertical one or any horizontal one at all. So let's turn my grid back on. Control apostrophe to turn your grid on and off. Just hold down shift and drag here and here. Okay, and so now those are a little too heavy. Here and here. Alright, so now I have like a simple kind of ground. I can go in and I can play with these just a little bit. Some of these are maybe too big. I probably want to get a nice textured brush. Something like that. And just paint into this a little bit. I'm going to offset this one more time. Filter offset. Okay, just so that I don't accidentally, you know, paint only in one area, so that it tiles properly. Okay, so now I have one 512 by 512 texture here, which is not going to take up a lot of my budget, right? So I have like 2K texture maps. I'm going to take this, I'll go File, Export, Quick Export as PNG. I'll put this in our class, oops. Modular environment creation. Okay, class room floor. Alright, so we have that PNG saved out. So let's load it in here. Okay, so first we want to be in a view mode that this will be visible. So make sure we're not in viewport shading. We'll go into this one. If we're in viewport shader, we can make it work. So we'll just click on this down arrow, and where it says color, instead of material, object, vertex, single random, we'll hit it texture here. And so that way any kind of texture map that I apply to this will be visible. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a material. So I'm going to go down to my material properties here. So in my properties panel, the material tab is this one second from the bottom. I'll hit new. So again, without me making a new material, I have no way to tell this geometry to reference a particular image. So I have to do this. Again, yeah, you have to create the material in Blender. You can assign the texture in Blender or in Sketchfab. It's up to you. You do not have to assign the texture in Blender, but it is useful to kind of see what it looks like. But it does have to have its own unique material. for Sketchfab to be able to recognize that you want to have a different texture on this versus something else. All right, so with this set here, I'll set this to floor. I'm gonna go ahead where it says base color. I could of course change the color here, to whatever I want. And that's not showing up here. I'm just gonna switch to my viewport preview shading mode. So I can set this to a solid color, but I want that detailed image that I created in Photoshop. So to do that, I have to say, instead of using a flat color, reference a particular texture map. So I'm clicking here on the yellow dot. I'll go to choose a texture, image texture. And in this case, it doesn't exist already in the scene, so I have to go to open. Okay, and it was this one here. You can always visualize these by clicking on this thumbnail. So this was the image that I wanted. Okay, when it loads in, you'll see it looks like that. So this is my floor tile. Now, I can now, in object mode, I can duplicate this, Shift D. All right. I press Shift R to just repeat the last thing I did. And so you see I can kind of build out like a customized floor, as big of a floor as I want here. And I'm actually going to delete these extras that I made. Let's give this a proper name. Let's call this floor. Let's call it floor object so we know what it is. You'll notice we can also name it the actual contents of the object. So again, this is the holder, the content, a transformation space, an object. It's a transformation point. The components. This is the actual geometry, the elements that live inside. So let's call this floor geo or geometry. Don't have to do this, but again, it's just helpful to be aware. And let's continue with that. I'll go to my materials here. We'll call this floor material. Okay, just so we have a good sense of what's what and all that. And then the texture is called classroomfloor.png, the actual texture image. All right, so we have that, and we can start building out our floor. Let's make a wall piece. And actually for our wall piece, we can basically just use the floor piece. But we might want to make it taller. I think we might be okay. So I'll press Shift D here to duplicate this. I'll press R, X, 90 to rotate it up 90 degrees. It's important which direction this is supposed to face. So I need to rotate it. You can always visualize if your scene geometry is facing the right way. You can go into your viewport overlays option right here. Click down and see where it says face orientation. We can click on that. Anything that's blue means I'm looking at it like face up. Anything red means I'm looking at the back of it. Okay, so I actually need to rotate this RZ180 GX. All right, so this is a duplicate object. I actually want to change the material. I want to change the texture and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do, where it says floor object.001, I'm going to change the name of the container, the object. I'll call this wall object. Okay. I don't want to change the material. I want to make a new material, so I can hit the X here. Okay, and I'll just hit new, and we'll call this wall material. and we'll go to the components. We'll call this wall geometry. All right. And so let's get a nice wall texture. So same as we did for the floor, we want to generate some kind of nice wall, classroom wall texture. Nothing crazy. But let's go back to Photoshop. I'll go File, New. Great. Let's look at my reference. So what kind of wall? Like, see, these walls are pretty plain. They're pretty regular. This one has some wallpaper. So probably just want a basic regular wall, nothing crazy. Just a simple paint texture. So we don't want it to be pure white. That's a little too boring. And I'll probably put some kind of like vertical line or something like that to make it just a little bit more visually interesting. So let us choose. I think we drag this over here. Dock this. Can't dock it. Oh, there we go. So I can make sure that these two kind of match up. So on this one, let's get our layers back. Again, I'm going to double click on that. Just fill with a color here. Actually, let's go even less saturated. Let's get a gray, nice gray here. Go ever slightly darker. See, I have a nice brush here that'll go into my brushes. And I'll just paint some like vertical strokes here. Let's get a little bit of noise, you know, so it's not totally uniform. It's flat. As flat as I can make it, but like not too flat. I'll put a couple little kind of, maybe this classroom is not the cleanest. A couple little blotches and splotches there. But again, nothing too crazy. I don't want it to be too noticeable. I want it to read as fairly flat. I'll probably press Control U here. I'll just probably maybe darken this or desaturate a little. Darken it ever so slightly. And then I'll bring up my grid. Change my brush here back to a simpler brush. Let's drag down. Oops. Okay. Get rid of that. So what I'm doing, I'm just simply kind of like suggesting maybe there's this wallpaper, or maybe there's you know, some kind of like crevice in the wall or something. There's something going on there. I'm just painting in some of the extra form detail that we might see if it was wallpaper. Nothing crazy, very subtle, right? Okay, my textures are really going to carry me here on this in this scene. All right, and let's offset this. I don't want it to be too noticeable, just because I, you know, as I tile up and as I tile across, I don't want this to be super repetitive. But let's offset this. And it's mostly kind of okay, but kind of see there's a little bit of an issue there. And I gave you guys these brushes last year. I don't know if you guys still have them. My GB brushes. But I can always share them again if you need. All right. And what I will say, textures are one thing where, like, if you want to mix in like photo references that you find online, I'm okay with that. Please like tweak it in some way, like make some adjustments to it. Don't just use it like as is, wherever possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and I can either, I'm actually gonna offset this again. And I'll save that image or file, export as quick as PNG, and I'll call this wall. Call this wall texture, just to follow my naming convention here in Blender. Let's assign this. So again, we've created a new material. Remember, we had a floor material. I'm going to turn off my viewport face orientation overlay. So here's where we can get into trouble. We can accidentally. So this we had a question, and I think this might be hopefully the answer to the question. I'm looking back. I think it was Aditya. So what could happen is if you have a material, and I'm not sure this is what you're doing. I don't think so. But if you have a material and you if you have duplicated your object as I have here, and I'm using this now as my wall object, it's still referencing the same material. So if I make any change to this material, it's going to change it everywhere. I actually have to like not break that reference, but I guess on this object I have to break that reference. So I have to tell it not to reference that material, but instead to reference a brand new material of my choosing. So if I were to go in here and say rename this floor material, if I were to try and name that wall material, I will get rid of my floor material. We can actually see here how many things are referencing this particular object or this node. And it looks like I have 5 things referencing this, which is surprising to me because I only have like 2 geometries in here. But yeah, so that's something to be aware of. So I'll click on this. Again, you can press the X here to get rid of that material, or you can press this new material, which will make a duplicate of that material. So you'll see floor material.001, for example. But in my case, I already made a new one, wall material, which is a blank slate. Now I can add a base color. Again, I'll go for an image texture. I will open. And I'll get this wall texture. Alright, so now I have this floor and I have this wall. So I can take this, I can duplicate it, Shift D, press X, press Shift R to repeat that last step, which was a duplication with a move. So Shift R will duplicate and move it. Shift R will duplicate and move it. Might be a little on the dark side, but it's okay. I'll select each of these, Shift D, Z, and then move that up. So how high do I want my ceilings to be? So right now it's this is 2 meters, 4 meters. Let's go for 6 meters. Let's get some floor tiles. Shift D. Oops. Shift D, Shift C. Okay, so if you're wondering what I did there, I just selected a few of them, right? Shift, selected them. I Shift D to duplicate, and before I confirm, I move them to the next adjacent spot on Y axis in this case by 2 meters, and then I confirm, right? And then again, I can repeat that last command by pressing Shift R. It'll basically duplicate and move, duplicate and move, duplicate and move. Okay, if you have a problem snapping, it'll snap better if you don't have a median point on, if you have bounding box center on. Okay, so there we go. So we have our basic kind of scene setup. So this is our classroom floor. That's our wall. The wall is a little on the dark side. I think we need to adjust that actually. But that's easy to do. I can go into Photoshop, select this wall, this here, oops, and press Ctrl U, lighten that up, very, very light, hit OK. And File, Export, Quick Export is PNG, and just overwrite the previous one. Okay, it won't update right away, but if I click on this here wall texture, if I just re-import it, I should get that lighter version. And it looks like partially that's the color there is partially due to just the lighting. It's not getting a lot of light there with its orientation. As you can see, but that's okay. All right, so that's our wall. Let me select a bunch of these. Shift D, duplicate. X, bring it to the edge here. I'm going to shift select this last one. I will change my pivot mode to active element. I'm going to press R, Z, 90 minus here. Shift D, Y. Get all these. Shift D, R, Z, 180. And I'll just press G and Shift Z to move it with on the ground plane and just snap that into place. All right, so now I have a nice big classroom space. We need windows, we need a door, we'll need some kind of chalkboard, we'll need some kind of baseboard trim as well. Okay. And then we can, it's tempting to go in and start previewing what this will look like with lights. Shift A here, in render mode, Shift A. That's all this is. Like when we're working in Blender, we're just previewing, because ultimately all of the stuff that you guys do here is going to wind up in your video games. We can bake the lighting, so we'll talk about that. We can bake lighting in, which is kind of neat. So let me. But light baking is going to be actually a little tricky with modular elements. It doesn't work quite as well with modular elements. There's a few kind of workarounds that we'd have to kind of go through. But we'll talk about it. So I'm going to add a light. So I'll add a spotlight. I'll just raise that up. Okay, and I really do like spotlights, just because of how much control we have over them. So set the power here to something realistic, like say 100 watts. Move that up. We'll adjust the radius, or sorry, the size, which is the cone, the fall off there. We can change the blend here, turn the blend up, so we get some nice light in our scene. I can change this even higher. Let's set that to say 200. There we go. So we're nice. Now we're starting to get like a nice kind of light setup. This is starting to become very like a lot more spooky than I intended. Shift D. It's not giving me that nice clean kind of classroom. That floor is looking very dingy. It's starting to like but it's okay. Shift D. Okay. We should limit ourselves to three lights, just because in Sketchfab we can only have 3. All right. So we want a few things. Like we want a desk, like a teacher's desk. We want a chalkboard and different things like that. We want a door. So let's look at making that door first. So a door is about, we can look at the measurements. Door size in meters. So 80 inches. 72 inches is 6 feet. So this is what, 6 feet 8 inches by about 3 feet. So it's about, let's say, 1 meter wide by about 2 meters tall, just to kind of keep ourselves, keep it simpler. So 1 meter by 2 meters, we'll say. So we want, I'm going to actually join these two. So I'll select this. I'll shift select this one. This will be where my door is going to be. I'll press Control J to join them. Okay, so now I have this one geometry now. It actually has 2 squares. It consists of 2 squares, one overlapping the other. And each of them has the same texture. Right, so on the UV space, this has the same mapping as this, which is good because it's going to allow us to reuse the same texture, the same tiling texture from here to here. So that's fine, that's okay, but we have extra geometry here because these aren't connected. So I want to select everything here, press Control A, sorry, just press A to select everything, and then M to merge by distance. And what that's going to do, it's going to look at this overlapping vertice, and it's just going to really remove the doubles and merge these 2 meshes together. So tap M here and merge by distance, and you'll see it's removed 2 vertices. And now if I select one of these, it's all joined together. Okay, and they both still have that same texture applied. It's a little faint, very subtle, but definitely it's there. All right. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control R, like so, to cut an edge loop, and I'm going to make 3 cuts. And this is just a math decision here because 3 will give me quarters, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 4 quarters. 2 quarters is 1/2, right? So I want my door to be 1 meter wide. So I'm going to repurpose this to be, the top is going to be just a wall. Here will be a door hole. So I'll select these two. I'll just press X here. Just trying to think how I should do this. I can press, so I can either delete these or I can press P to separate. P, and I'll separate by selection. Okay, so I have this door opening, and then I have this door. I want to have like a door frame and everything like that, but if I just select this here, see I have this wireframe, so I could draw in my door texture here, and that would work. And I would want to also have some kind of baseboard. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to make my door and door frame from this. So first I'll delete this center edge, or dissolve it. I'll select this center loop. I'll press X here, dissolve edges, select this whole face, press I to inset slightly. And what I'm doing this for is to get this nice door frame geometry here. I'm going to select this face down here. I'll press X to delete it, delete that face. And I just want to move this edge here down so it's level with the ground here. So to do that, I'm going to go into vertice mode with my pivot point set to active element. I'm going to select one of these points at the very bottom. And with these two selected also, I'll press S, Z, 0, and it'll snap those to be level with that
Gavin, I just had a
ground.
question.
Yes, go for it.
So my question is, basically I took my fire texture and I resized it in Blender. Do I need to resize it in my texture map, or can I keep it like the same size?
You can keep it the same size. But the bigger the object is in your scene, the more of a likelihood it'll start to get blurry if you don't have a lot of texture UV space assigned to it. Okay, so just be mindful of that. All right, so I'm going to select the edge loop here. I'm just going to press V to rip it. Okay, so I can rip this off and then right click immediately. Okay, so you can see that that is now separate from the door frame. I'll select just this door frame here. I'll press E. I'll turn off the snapping. I'm going to press E to extrude that out just a little bit. Like so. I don't need this back side because I'll never see it. So I'm going to delete these back faces. It'll also make some faces down here as well. I'll never see these parts, so I'm going to delete them. X. Delete those faces. Okay. And I will actually need a baseboard, so let's start planning that now. Press Control R here. Sorry, Control R here. And I'll move it all the way down to the bottom. And then I'll just move it up again. G, Z to move it up. So I've moved it all the way down to the bottom just to flatten it out against the bottom geometry. And now I'm going to move it up. And I'm going to be very deliberate about how high I move it up. So I'm going to move it up by like 0.1 meter or something. So GZ I've already pressed. And I'll press 0.1. Okay, so that's going to be the level of my baseboard. And here, I'll do the same thing over here. Control R. Move that all the way down. And then G, Z, 0.1. Okay. I'm gonna select this. I can also select this. I'm gonna change my pivot mode to, I can do individual origins or a median point. Doesn't really make a difference. I'm gonna press, I can press Alt E to do a certain type of extrude. So Alt E will bring up my different extrusion options. So I can extrude faces along normals here. Okay, and that'll just basically extrude each face directly out from its from where it is. And then I can kind of set my door frame or my baseboard like that. Okay, but I need to make sure it doesn't go too far. I need to be very precise with this, and I also want to delete these faces because they will never again be they'll never be seen. Right, so just want to get rid of those, and select this edge loop, turn snapping back on, snapping to the grid increments, press G, Y here. Okay, you'll see it'll snap directly to that point. I also have these new faces on the back that I don't need as well. I'll delete those. Okay, I'll do the same thing here. Just like that edge loop. G, Y here. You see how it snaps directly to that, to each of these grid lines. So see how it snaps directly there. So now I have this door frame. I'm gonna just clean it up just a little bit more. Select this point, shift select this point, press M, and I'll merge them at the last point. I don't need that extra geometry. I'll do the same here, this to this. Actually want to make sure I don't actually accidentally join it to this door. So I'll select that door, press H to hide it. This point, shift select this point, M, merge at last. This to this, or this and this to this, M, merge at last, this to that, merge at last. So why did I get rid of this back geometry, this geometry that we don't see? Because it's just a waste of like poly count, and it's also a waste of texture space when I unwrap this thing. So it just keeps my scene a lot more optimized. So just getting rid of those extra faces. And I'm just gonna press slash here on my numpad. That isolates my view, so I can kind of see if I've really optimized this as much as I'd like to. And it looks like I have, right? So here is open because it's going to hook up with another piece that's going to be adjacent to it. And so it looks like we're pretty good. So I'm going to select these two faces, or actually even better, I'll just select these two edges. Okay, I'll select these two edges, I'll press Shift D, I can duplicate it, and then immediately right click to leave it back in the spot that it started from. Then I'll press P to separate that selection. Tab out of edit mode into object mode and select that line. So I just have this line that I want to select. And it's right there. It's hard to tell, but I have selected this line. And you can see I can move that just a line by itself. Okay, so this is a separate object. I'll call this baseboard. Baseboard object. and we'll tab into edit mode. Select it here. Let's tap A. We're in edge mode. Press E and Y2 minus. Okay, so this is our baseboard. This is going to be a corner piece, so we'll need to kind of work that out. But we can start with this, and I can reuse this baseboard section elsewhere. Shift E, Y. It's a little hard to notice, so let's give it its own unique color as well. So let's call this, let's clear out this material. Again, we don't want to overwrite our wall material. Let's clear it out. We'll call this new, make new, and we'll call this base board material. And we'll give it a color, like so. We'll make sure this has the same material assigned. Baseboard material. We'll want to do that for this as well. So we'll just select just this guy here, and we're going to change the material to baseboard material. You see that also changes the color of the door, because the door is also part of that object. Because if you remember, I just hid it, so Alt H will unhide whatever I have hidden there, which is that door. Okay, but we can see our classroom is starting to take shape a little bit. We'll need to model out our door, we'll need to texture it and all that kind of stuff. But it's starting to come together. Steven, just make sure that the make sure you're not, because you can select, so I'm just seeing your comment now, you can select multiple objects like this in object mode, press tab to go into edit mode and try to merge. It'll never merge because they're separate objects, they live in separate containers. To merge the geometry, you'll have to select the two objects first, then join them by pressing Ctrl J. Okay, Ctrl J to join. And then they live in the same container, and then you can merge them, okay, by distance. I suspect that's the issue that you ran into. Okay, so let's work out this corner piece. This will be something we need quite a lot. So I'm going to press Shift D here. We'll move up here. We'll just rotate this on Z 90 degrees. And I want to select this, shift select this, and then just press Ctrl J to join these together, like so. Okay. I'm going to isolate the selection by using the slash on my numpad. Control spacebar in any window, by the way. Control spacebar in any window to go full screen on it. Hold down Control, press spacebar. So I want a little bit more real estate here in my 3D viewport, so we've done that. Tab into edit mode. Okay, and I want to snap this to that point, and this to that point. So to do that, I'm going to turn on snapping. I'm going to change my snapping settings here to vertex snapping. I'll select this point here, and I'll press G here, and then I'll snap to, actually, I'm going to select this whole edge. So this is kind of critical how we do this. Make sure your snapping is set to vertices. We're going to select this edge, and then I'll press G and choose the axis that I want to move along, in this case the Y axis. I'll press Y to constrain my movement to the Y axis. Then I'm going to hover over a vertice that is at the location that I want to snap to. So this vertice over here, I'll hover over that and then I'll left click. Okay, I'll do the same thing here. Select this. I'll press G, in this case X, to move along the X axis. And then I'll hover at the vertice that I want to snap to, in this case this one. Okay, I'm going to press Control or A here to select everything, M, and merge by distance. Okay, removed 3 vertices, this one, and that one. And now if I test this, you can see that these are all connected. All right, cool. And the pivot point is right at the corner. It's not here, it's right here. Okay, and that's important because this allows me to snap this joint, this connection, right into the corners of my walls of my scene, of my room. Okay, so now if I look at this, oops. Okay, so we have a lot of the pieces that we need starting to come together. We have this just regular piece, which we'll use for most of our walls. Shift D, Y, 2. Let's turn our snapping back to increment. Okay, and then for the corners we'll use this one. Shift D, Y, put that right in the corner there, and then rotate on Z 90 degrees minus. Alright, so that's kind of how we start fleshing this thing out. We'll do the same kind of thing for windows and all those kinds of things. We probably want to UV this properly and texture this properly, and make sure we have a different material for the door versus the baseboard or the trim and the frame here. I'm actually just going to make this a little lighter. Let's make it lighter and grayer. Maybe a little darker there. All right, so so we've talked about this before, but let's cover it again because I recognize we covered it early on. So we want to have like this. We want to have 2 different textures applied to this, 2 different types of materials. One for the door and one for maybe the trim or the frame here. So we'll go in here and we can, where we have the baseboard material applied to everything, we'll just hit the plus here in our materials tab. And I'll go for new, and we'll call this door material. Okay. And then in edit mode, we're going to select everything that we want to have our door material. In this case, just our door, right? Select the door material here and hit assign. Okay, and then now that will take a different material, so whatever I set here will just be applied to my door. Okay, I still have to do my UVs for this, so I still have to make sure the UVs are all kind of correct, so that I could put a nice wood grain or whatever kind of texture I want to have on this door. Classroom doors usually have some kind of a window as well, so let's select this door, press I here to inset this, S, Z to scale this up, or scale this vertically, G, Z to move it upwards, turn off snapping, GZ to move this up, I one more time to inset, select this edge loop, and E, extrude just a little bit out, slightly out. Okay, we'll also of course need a handle, and ideally some hinges as well. You can select this edge here, and I'll press Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'll press Shift A, and I'll add a cylinder like so. I'll press S, Shift Z, just to scale that down. Do it again. S, Shift Z, scale that down, down, down. Okay, and I'll press Control R here. Just cut a bunch of edge loops on this, like so. Turn on wireframe. Just gonna delete a bunch of these faces. Careful, don't get in the wrong selection there. Oops. Actually, I want to keep that one. Get rid of that one. There we go. X, delete those faces. Okay, so I just have these. Select that. Just fill those. Could also do one and just duplicate it. Probably would have been smarter. Remember to duplicate whatever you have selected, you just press Shift D and it will duplicate, whether in object mode or edit mode. You can duplicate in either mode. I will want to select these front faces. Okay. Oops. I'll just extrude them, E, and I'll make sure I extrude them on the, in this case, X-axis. Like so. And I'll press S, X, 0 just to flatten those off. Okay, and we want a kind of some kind of a door handle. So I'm going to press Shift, right click here just to pull my 3D cursor. Excuse me, at this location. I'll press Shift A. I'll add a UV sphere, like so. Just scale it all the way down, get to a knob size, zoom in, rotate this, rotate it on y-axis in this case by 90 degrees, scale it on the x-axis. G, X here, just to move it out. And I'll just select the edge loop here. X, delete those faces. Select all the linked faces to this remaining island. Delete those as well. I'll select this edge loop. Scale it down. Extrude on the x-axis here. And then extrude again on the x-axis, and then scale it up. And extrude on the x-axis one more time. Control L here to select everything linked. Okay, you notice I'm kind of moving between object mode or wireframe mode and wireframe mode and shaded mode, just to kind of get a sense of what's going on here. I'm just going to scale this S Shift X here to only scale on this vertical plane here. Okay, select this edge loop, G, X here. Control R to cut an edge loop, G, X. So I can kind of play around with the shape that I have here. I probably don't need that back face either. Select everything linked, Control L to select everything linked. And sometimes in 3D modeling, the things that are in our scene will get in our way. And you just want to see this, right? So we can go to wireframe. That's sometimes helpful, but sometimes it's not, right? So what we can do is we can invert our selection by pressing Control I here. So select what you want to keep, then invert your selection by pressing Control I, and then press H to hide that the visibility of whatever that thing was. And I just wanted to check to make sure I delete that back face there, and I have, so I'm good. So I can press Alt H here to just bring back the visibility of everything else. All right, so now I'm pretty good. And yeah, we still have an hour. Sorry guys, I'm just gonna keep going, and then we'll just wrap maybe a little bit early if that's okay. So we have this. We'll need to kind of change up our materials and everything like that, but we have like something that looks more like a door. And so we're kind of moving. We're getting there. We're making progress. We'll need a ceiling as well. For the ceiling, we'll actually just use our floor. So we'll just kind of repurpose this. Just drop those lights from our selection by holding down Control and dragging. Shift D, Z, hold down Control to snap. I'll just press R, X here, 180. I'll just make sure that's snapped in spot. These lights, I'll need to just drop them down so that they're not going to get blocked by the ceiling there. Alright, so now we have a ceiling. We're going to need to change that ceiling up though. So let's change one, and then I'll tell you how we can quickly change the others. Okay, so I'll select one. I will change the object name. Call this ceiling object. We'll go to the verts and we'll call this ceiling geometry. And we'll go to the material and we'll clear out this material by hitting the X there, hit new. We'll call this a ceiling material. Alright, so now we see it's like this. So what we can do, we can actually select all of these. All the ones that we want to be treated the same way. Let's go to the top and do this. Oops, don't get the floor ones by accident. And the easiest way to do this, I'm just going to go to wireframe and just select like so. And then control select out the things I don't want to include. I need to make sure the one that I changed is the most recently selected. So I'm going to shift select that one just so it's my active element. Okay, the most recently selected element. And I can press Control L to make some linkages or to copy some data from one object to another. So I want to copy the I want to link the materials. And I want to link the I guess just the materials is enough. Let's click on one of these. So now all of these have the same material. They don't have the names updated, unfortunately, but they have the geometry updated. Okay, but the name is, again, it's just the name of the container, so those haven't been changed. I'm sure there's a script I could run to kind of change those programmatically, but I do not know how to do that. So we have this, and so we have our wall. Our wall works perfectly. We have our door. We'll need to UV unwrap our door. We have our baseboard. Let's get more of our baseboard in. Set this to bounding box. Press and turn snapping on. Shift D, Shift Z. R, Z, 90. G, Shift Z. G, oops. GX here. Shift D, X. Let's grab this one too. Shift D, Shift Z. Let's put that right there. Change this to active element. And just R, Z, 90. Do that again. Shift D, Shift Z. Put that corner right there, and just press R, Z, 90. Alright, we're good. And just move this one here. Shift D, Shift Z. Okay. Let's make sure we don't have accidental overlapping geometry here. No, we're good. Okay, so we have a very nice dingy looking classroom, which is, not exactly what I was going for, but we'll take it. We do want to have some windows, and we do want to have some furniture. We'll make a teacher's desk, and we'll take a look at UV unwrapping that. And then we'll talk about how we can organize all of our textures together, because we're going to have a texture for the floor, we're going to have a texture for the wall. We can keep them as unique textured elements, and that's absolutely totally fine. Like it falls plenty within the threshold of our our texture budget, right? So two 512 by 512 maps is like, let's see. So we have 2048 times 2, or sorry, it's 2048 by 2048 squared. So that's how many pixels we have, right, in one 2K texture map. We have that times 2. So 8 million something. Just copy that. And then our 512 by 512 equals, and we have that times 2. Right, so one 512 map for our wall, one 512 map for our floor. So we have this number. So we want to divide 8 million something by this. And I'm just going to copy and paste this here. And copy paste this. Control C. So this is like, you know, I could just look at the squares and figure this out, but it's kind of like just so we can kind of really break down what we're working with here. So press Control V here. So we have this 8 million from our 2K, 2 times 2K maps. We divide that by our two 512 maps and divide by that number. So we get 16. So we could have 16 of our 5. Basically, we have we're only using 1/16 of our space, right? So of our allotted budget with these two unique texture maps, and they're already doing so much, right? So our door, you can imagine that probably maximum we need a 1K map, you know, but we could probably get away with a 2K map as well, or a 512 by 512 map as well. So we're plenty within our budget. You know, we want to manage it and kind of like kind of use it wisely, because we still have to texture all of the desks and, you know, everything else that's going to be our scene, but they don't have to be that big. All right, so we can have, like I said, multiple small texture maps, or we can kind of bind them all together into one bigger texture map in something we call an atlas. All right, so let's make a window. And for that, let's use the grease pencil. So I'm going to press Shift, right click here, and I will go to press Shift A to add a new object. It'll be a grease pencil. I'll create a blank one. Okay, I'm going to go into draw mode, where it says here, I'm going to set the origin to be the 3D cursor, and I'll say the drawing plane to be the YZ. Okay, so I'm looking at this axis here, Y and Z. That's my plane that I'm looking at. So the drawing plane here I want to be YZ. And so now if I draw, let's change my strength to 100% there. Turn off the pressure dynamics for that. And now I can kind of plan out, oops. No available frame for creating stroke. What does that mean? Okay, this is an error actually I encountered in this version of Blender. I don't know what it is, but I actually had to make a new grease pencil object, grease pencil layer, for the drawing to work. It's faint, but it's there. So we're drawing basically this window. We can kind of plan out the dimensions of that window. So if you imagine, like, if you are working in a team, you know, and you are a level designer and you're giving stuff to your modeler or whatever, you could say, oh, I need a crack in the wall here, you know, and here we're gonna have you know, some crates or some boxes, or this is where the bookshelf is going to be. So you can kind of quickly tell your team, I need this, I need that, make it look like this, make it look like that. No, add some drapes. You know, in our classroom, we're not going to have drapes like that, but that's the idea. You can quickly plan out and kind of like discuss these ideas with your team. And I'm just changing. Grease pencil has its own material options as well. We could say, let's have a cobweb up in the corner here, you know. There's all kinds of things we could do, right? But we can quickly plot out and plan using grease pencil. Excuse me. Let's have a globe here. Okay. So let's continue with that. Let's jump out of grease pencil now, and let us create a window. Ideally, we'll have it as a component of these guys. The grease pencil is an object as well. I can actually select it and I can move it. So G, Y, or X here. Turn off snapping. So G, X. I'm sorry, Y. I can kind of move it. I can scale it. Okay. And so I'll take these. I'll do what I did before over here for the door. And I'll press select this one, shift select this one, Control J to join them. Tab into edit mode. Okay, while they're joined. So again, I did it quickly, so you might have missed that step, but I had to join them. I can't join geometry that lives in separate containers. So I have to join them first. So select this one, shift select the bottom piece, press Control J to join. Tab into edit mode. With everything selected here, A, M, merge by distance. You'll see that 2 vertices were removed. I need to keep this edge. If I get rid of this edge, it'll break my UVs. So I actually need to keep that edge there. But with that, I will think about how high I want these windows to be. Let's go for big windows. Let's press I here to inset. Okay, and now one other kind of issue that I need to be mindful of is when I do certain operations in edit mode, it will actually distort my UVs. So instead of like moving this edge up, like that inset is no problem. My UVs know how to understand that. So if I look at my UVs, I select everything here, and I look at the UVs. You see how this top part, it just worked out perfectly. It knew to set these UVs in here. And then this one, same thing. Oops. It knew to align the UVs like so, so that it'll still work with that tiling texture wall image that I made. But if I were to go in here and I select this and I just moved it up like that, and then I look at the UVs, see how it didn't adjust the position of this? It just kept it with what I had initially, so this will cause distortion. This part will be too big. It'll be look squashed horizontally, and this part will look stretched out vertically with whatever texture I had in here. So to avoid that, what I would do is press Control R here to cut an edge loop. Okay, so if I want that to be the bottom of my ceiling or the bottom of my window frame, I would press Control R to cut an edge loop. If I look at the UVs, it knew exactly what to do with that. So see how it cut it right there. And so I'll do the same thing up here, Control R. Here, bevels also work. So bevels are also kind of like not a problem. Okay. So let's take this, and we'll press I here. We'll inset that. press, select this. Let's go up close. Press E just to extrude that ever so slightly to get the frame on our window. And you know what? Let's not go for like a standard regular window. Let's just extrude this backward. E. Let's extrude this inwards. Extrusions don't work properly. You see the extrusions doesn't know what to do with that. So this face here, these faces, they actually don't get any space. They're just like flat here. Okay, so that's a bit of a problem. But it's not that big of a problem because I'm going to separate all this out. I'll press P here, separate that out. It's going to be its own separate geometry. We can say that this grease pencil served its purpose. I will delete that. I just wanted to show you guys that as a because it's something that could potentially be beneficial to you. I'm going to set this to shade flat. All right, and next thing I want to do is we can UV unwrap this. So I'm going to set a seam here, seam here, seam here, seam here. Actually, we don't need this. Actually, I'll use it. Control B, just bevel that out just a little bit. I'll select this face here, just this one face. I'm going to press Alt E. Okay, and there's a extrude option called extrude manifold. This is a really special extrusion option. If I extrude manifold and I go like this, it's actually not going to create a face here. So it's normally if I just did a regular extrusion, that'd have like overlapping faces here. So let's Control Z to undo that. Okay, and if I just do a regular extrusion, if I just press E and extrude, you see how it extrudes, but it creates that like overlapping, there's these two faces there. This one, or let's make it more obvious. Select this edge, just move that out. Or is it one? Yeah, so it just causes some problems for us, right? It creates that one extra edge or one extra face there. But if we don't want that, we will instead extrude manifold. So Alt E, extrude manifold, and I'll move it up. You'll see how it just knows. It's like very intelligent. It knows kind of what to do. And even if I go beyond, I believe it even makes these new vertices here. So this is actually exceedingly handy. It's a new version. It was like added like in like the last year or two to Blender, and it's really, really helpful. So we use extrude manifold. Okay, and that's going to just give us like a little edge, a little lip there on our window. Okay. Just to keep this as optimal as possible, I'll take that to that, and I'll press Alt or press M, merge at last, this to this, M, merge at last, this to this, M, last. Okay, that way we have all quads everywhere. And what I'll do now is mark some seams here, here, I'll cut this out too. This, this, and this. So press right click and then we'll mark seams. Okay, press A to select everything and just press U to unwrap. Okay, so we have a nice unwrap here. Alright, and We'll want to unwrap our baseboard as well. And we want to have a few more windows actually too. So let's get rid of these. Take this and this. Shift D. Y. Hold down Control to snap. Shift R to repeat that. Alright. Okay, and let us just unwrap all of this geometry. Numpad on the numpad decimal to jump to whatever you have selected. Okay, to pivot around whatever you have selected. Okay. Okay, so we'll select those two edges. Shift select these two edge loops as well on our door frame. We'll mark those. Mark seams. We will go to our door handle. Just get a nice edge loop here. You don't need any of this. Go into our wireframe. Again, just there's no right or wrong way to do this. I'm just trying to imagine like how would this unwrap flat. So I'll mark these seams. Make sure I have the previous ones all selected. Or no, I already marked those. So I'll just right click and mark those seams as well. Get this. Sorry, just this. You know, I'll just do this, 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 and we'll just get the full edge loop there. And we'll get this here. You know what? Why not? I'll just do the rest of this just so it'll break up into smaller pieces. And I can imagine there being a seam on the geometry here anyways as well, so I don't have to worry about the introducing a seam there. There's actually a lot of unnecessary geometry here on these, but it's okay. I'm running into a problem. I can't get close enough to this, so I'm just gonna mark the seams that I have selected so far. So again, right click and mark those seams, and then I'll just go and I can select this, and I'll press decimal on my numpad. Press Control Spacebar here in this window to go full view. Get a little bit more. A little bit more visibility here. And I'm realizing I probably missed a couple of edges on the other one as well. I'm trying to think. This should unwrap okay. And that's annoying. You know what? I'm going to switch to face mode. Select that face. It's easier. Then go back to edge mode and select that edge. And right click, mark those seams. We'll do this one. Select that face. Decimal on numpad to kind of go to that. Select that face, go to edge mode. Right click, mark those seams. Okay. And I think I got everything on the door. The door itself is flat, so it doesn't have any like weird bends on it, so that should be fine. These will unwrap nicely. Okay. So just press A to select everything here, Control Spacebar to bring this back, and make sure we got everything. Alt. Yep, and then we'll just press U and hit unwrap. Okay, and then we have everything decently unwrapped. These guys didn't work out quite as nicely as I had hoped, but they're good enough. Our door is upside down, unfortunately. We can select everything in here. It's R180. Okay, we just have a little bit of dead space, but for our purposes, for now, I think we can live with that. So that's unwrapped. I think everything is unwrapped except for maybe my baseboards. So let's do those as well. And these they don't really need anything fancy. I can mark that seam. Okay, just get that. We'll do the same thing here. This one actually, we don't even need to mark any seams. It's just going to unwrap nicely. So I'll just press U and hit unwrap here. I'll just get that. That's good. All right. I haven't unwrapped these. So if I look at this, I don't have any UVs on this. And so what I want to do is I want to select everything that hasn't gotten the UVs that's similar. So all of these baseboard pieces. And then I will shift select the one that I did unwrap, which is this one, the last one. Control L to copy data, copy the UV maps. So now all of these, if I select one of these and I select A, usually has the same UVs as I set up on this one. I only have one door, so I don't have to worry about doing that again. But if I did have another door that I made already and it didn't have UVs, I could also do that. And this is already ready to go. All right, so I think everything is basically ready. We'll need a new texture for the ceiling. We'll want to have a texture for the door here. We're still good for time. So let's make a desk quickly, and then just look at texturing everything, and then maybe look at how we might strategically add up our texture maps and what that exactly looks like. Okay. All right. So. Let me Shift S cursor to selected here, Shift A to add a new mesh. It'll be a cube. Tab GZ1 to move that up. Grab the top here. My desk is gigantic here, my teacher's desk. GZ. S, wow, oops. Change this back to a median point, SY. Okay, I'm gonna select this. This and this. I'll inset these like so. And I can do that thing where I select this bottom face, and we can Alt E to extrude manifold, and I can, if I go like this, it should work. I'll go to here for now. I'll get these actually. I'll press Alt E again, extrude manifold. I'll press S. Oh, that's not doing what I want. G. So this might be a little pickier. So G, Z will move down here. It's like this, and I'll just press Alt E. Sorry, Alt E, extrude manifold, and just move that in slightly, like so. And do the same thing here, Alt E, extrude manifold. Make this very thin. And anytime we're modeling something, especially in a classroom like this is always going to get in my way. I'm going to press slash on the numpad just to isolate the visibility of what I'm working on. I'm going to select this guy, Alt E, extrude manifold, and just get like a teacher's kind of like a desk area. I've introduced the n-gon, so let's select here to here. Press J to get rid of that. Just clean this up, this to that, merge at last. We also have an n-gon here actually. So here to here, at last, there we go. And probably have a couple more. Here to here. Okay. And of course, we can always run our scan to double check to see if we have any n-gons. We do. We have one here. J to just join those up. All right, so we have our teacher's desk here. Just gonna do one thing. Just gonna raise this up, E, ever so slightly. Select that loop of faces, and I'll press Alt E. I'm gonna extrude faces along normals this time, just to get a nice little ledge. Okay, some of these I can get rid of. I can get rid of this edge loop. And I can probably inset this a little bit. This Alt-E, extrude manifold. This to that. And okay. The only thing I'll change here is select each of these faces and these faces. I'll just press G, Z, just move us all down slightly so it's less of a step down there. I probably want this G, Z. Okay, so we have a simple desk here for our teacher. We'll UV unwrap this. Mark those seams. I just noticed something I want to clean up. So there to there, at last. Here and here, here. Sorry, and I realize I'm going a little fast here, guys, but it is. I want to get to the texture packing stuff. Sometimes it'll unwrap flat, but you want to have like smaller chunks so that you can add a few extra edge loops in there or a few extra seams in here. Strategically, let's put one here as well. So let's right click, mark those seams. Let's see what kind of result this gives us. A, U, unwrap. Okay, so I think for the most part, okay, we got something weird happening here. I think that I selected this seam by accident. Clear that seam, I don't want that. Make sure I have this one, that's the one I wanted. Mark that seam. So select everything here, unwrap again. And I'll separate this here. Mark seam, A, unwrap. Okay, and you know what? I will also mark that. Mark seam, A. See, I'm just trying to get rid of this weird, awkward angle thing I have here. U, unwrap. There we go. So much better. Not a perfect unwrap. I could nest a bunch of things in here to better take advantage of the space. But again, for expedience, at this point, I'm not going to fully optimize this space. But I would expect that you guys would take the time and lay things out as nicely as you can. I'm going to just go here. Just see where that edge is. Okay. So let me mark this one as well. Oops. I pressed E to extrude by accident. Let me right click and mark that seam. Select everything, U, unwrap. Alright, cool. Alright, so we have a desk, it's unwrapped. I think everything in our scene is now unwrapped. We'll need to give our desk a name. Call it desk object. We'll call it the geometry, desk geometry. We'll call the material, we'll make a new one. Call it desk material. Alright. And press slash on our numpad again. Okay, we should start to get a sense now of what our scene is going to look like to some degree. We can give a base material to this just to kind of get a sense of colors. Pre-plan colors, lighting and everything like that. Okay, so this is not too bad. I think it's working out nicely. I do have that desk that I made in the other scene that I can also bring in. So I'm going to do that. Save this file, save as. Okay, and you can always copy paste from one Blender scene to another. So I just see your question. You can have non-textured material. You can have non-textured materials, yes, but just be careful with that. Don't do it just because it's easier. Do it because you think it's going to make the scene look better. Okay. Okay. So I have this. I'm going to press Shift or Control C. I'm select these. Control C to select that. And then Control V to just paste this in here. G, Shift Z. My scale's way off. Okay. I think that desk is still way too big. So this classroom has all of a sudden become gigantic. And the easiest way for me to do this would just be to separate these out into two separate objects. The way I made them, it's not like it's very procedurally done. So let's kind of show you how I set this up. So this here, if I look at this in edit mode, it's actually just a wire. So I haven't applied any of this geometry. I just kept it live and dynamic. Whoops. I don't know what I did there. Yeah, so it's kind of like this. And basically, if I look at the modifiers, I have I started with just vertices. Okay, just start with these vertices floating like with lines, and then I added a bevel. And by the way, this is based on these chairs here. So it's like a wire that just kind of goes around and bends back and then comes back up. But to kind of keep myself flexible, I simply added a bevel modifier set to vertice mode on a wire, and then I can adjust the number of segments here, as you can see. And then I turned on a subdivision, but I didn't rely on that. Set that to 2, and then I use a subdivision surface modifier, which is going to take what I have there and just going to start smoothing it all out. Then I had a skin modifier. Skin modifier basically takes a wire or just an edge and it adds a thickness to it. So that's what's happening there. And then I subdivided that one more time to get the roundness going around it. So anyways, what I'm going to do just for now is going to apply these. So hit in object mode. I'll go here. I'm going to press apply, 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 and apply. So now if I go into edit mode, you'll see that all that geometry has now been applied. Okay, similar kind of setup with the chairs here. I have just a simple plane, okay, which I shaped the way I wanted. I added a solidify modifier to get some thickness on it. And then I added a bevel modifier to get a slight kind of roundness on the edges. Then I added a weighted normal modifier just to kind of clean up all the the problematic geometry. I'm going to go ahead and apply these as well. Apply, apply, and apply. And we'll do the same here, same setup. Apply, 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 apply. I'm only doing this so I can UV unwrap properly and all that kind of stuff. But normally I try to keep it as flexible as possible for as long as possible. Let's apply all this stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this and this and this and press Ctrl J just to join that all up. So this is all one object now. Oops. This, Control J. Okay, so this is all one object now. So now I can press Shift D, Shift Z, you know, and I can rotate these, kind of have them strewn about my space. You know, I could say that Shift D, Shift Z here, you know, if there's a fight in the classroom and, you know, when the chairs fell down. Or something, but I could start making this space. I could start telling my story. You know, I can start thinking about what do I want to say. You know, what happened here? What kind of class is this? You know, what kind of students go to this school? You know, and kind of lean into that and start making it like more interesting. In my particular case, I probably have too many polygons here. So in my viewport overlay settings, I can go for statistics. So I can see just in this one chair alone, I have 26,000 triangles. That's way too high. So this level of detail is not going to be what you guys are doing. This level of like, not that this is very realistic or anything like that, but not even towards this level of realism for you guys. Like, you're gonna kind of go much simpler. This desk is good amount of topology. Like, this is only 68 triangles, right? Each of my floor panels is one polygon, you know, 2 triangles. So anyways, that's what we're doing here. We're running a little light on time, so I'm going to just I don't know if we're gonna have time to texture UV unwrap the chair. Actually, I'll do it really quickly. I'm just gonna cut a new edge loop here just to make this a little simpler. Mark seam. Any kind of cylindrical form, usually we want to get the caps, and we'll get one edge running lengthwise. But I think to just kind of like go faster today, I'm gonna take a few shortcuts. I apologize. Mark seams, Control R. Control R. Mark seams. Just going to go into a isolate selected, go into an orthographic side view, wireframe, and just select a loop of edges like so. Let's do that here as well. Okay, and then I'll just get an edge loop that runs all the way up and down the whole thing, like so. And okay, I think that should be good. Right click, mark seams. And oops, forgot to unwrap. A, U, unwrap. Okay, so that actually gave me a decent result. A, U, unwrap. Again, looks good. All right, so those are unwrapped. I think I unwrapped this as well. Yep, I unwrapped that. So what we can do is we can select each of these. Oops, each of these elements. All right, that we have. This is where it gets a little tricky. We don't have to. We can, like I said, we can keep everything unwrapped separately, or have its own kind of 0 to 1 UV space, or we can join them all together into one bigger map. And to do that, we basically just select all the different unique elements, and we'll just press Tab to go into edit mode, and you can see all of these, everything we have selected here is, we're seeing all the UVs overlapped with each other. So what we can do is we can assign, we can think about, okay, I want this area to be for this floor tile, I want this area to be for this chair, and so on and so forth. We'll have to redo our textures though. We'll have to set up our textures to align with whatever we do here. Okay, so I can take my just my floor here. Okay, and if I think if this right now this is using a 512 by 512 texture image. But if I were going to switch this to a 2K image, right? So if I were going to have 2048 by 2048, 512 is only a quarter of that, right? So if I were in Photoshop, I can take this image, Control C, I'll make a new document, file new. And we'll go for 2048 by 2048. Okay. And I'll get my grid back up here. I can press Control V. Okay, and that's that same exact kind of floor. Okay, but I'm just putting it in one square. I didn't lose any texture density resolution or anything like that, but it's just kind of like, it's just a one small piece of this bigger texture image now. I can do the same thing for my wall. Control C. And then I can press Control V to paste it here. Wow, it's coming out darker than I realized. Yeah, so we can have this, right? So we can have our, within the 20 by 2048 by 2048 texture image, our 512 image maps only take up a small chunk, right? So we have a lot of space for our desk and our chair and our baseboards and any other thing that we want to put in here. In fact, we probably could have made these bigger. We could have probably made each of these 1024 by 1024. And been very comfortable in doing that. Right? But yeah, we did. So if I were to do this now, file, export as quick PNG. I'm going to call this classroom atlas texture. So an atlas texture is basically when we take a whole bunch of different textured elements and then kind of all combine it onto one bigger UV map. So what I'd have to do if I were to use this texture now, I would have to take my, select everything here, just move this outside of my coordinate space. Just move it out by 2, just so I have like some clarity on what's going on here. And I'm just going to select this one. I'll move this over here. -2. And then if I look at that Photoshop image, my floor is in the top left corner. So just to get this to work now, I'm going to select this, Shift S, cursor to selected. Oops, just select this one, Shift S, cursor to selected. What? Oh, I'm in edge mode. So make sure I'm in point mode. Shift S, cursor to selected. And then I'll select the rest of this here. Make sure my pivot mode is set to 2D cursor. And I can scale this by 0.25. Right? Does this make sense? So right now with my current texture map, it's not going to work. But if I replace in my material, let's go into object mode. So I'll go here, just like my floor again, and I'll go to the floor material, and I say to open instead the class atlas texture. You see how it goes back and it works again, right? Because if I look at my class atlas texture, that top left quadrant is dedicated to that specific texture. Okay, all my other floor tiles are busted, right? They don't have their UVs set now. Like the UVs on these other tiles are not the same as this one. Okay, so they're still using the old UVs. So if I look at the UVs on this, it's trying to use the entire space. But here, I just want to use a certain, like 1/16 of this space. Okay. So that is that's how we would go about this. And we would kind of do the same thing for the walls. So select the wall here. Okay, and scale this by 0.25. Okay, and then move it over G, X, 0.25. Okay, so now this wall piece works properly. Okay, but I need to tell it to use that same texture as well. So instead of wall texture, I want to now use the class Atlas texture. Okay, and because all the other wall materials are linked, they're having the same problem as this, because these guys are using the full UV space. But I need to change it so that they only use a quad, like this small area. So I want to select all these other wall pieces, right? Shift select them. And this one I have to do separately. This one's going to be unique. Shift select these. Shift select this one last. Press Control L, and then copy the UV maps. Okay. And once I do that, the UVs of this will be copied to everything else here. Okay. So now each of these will only be using that small area here. So that's how you can take multiple texture maps, right? Combine them into one bigger texture, and then kind of get your result that way. You do not have to do that. It's just the way to optimize things, and it's kind of just a little bit more. It's just a little bit more, maybe in some ways organized, right? So I can select these now. If I select each of these, let's get our door and our wall here. And tab into edit mode. Again, you'll see that a bunch of this stuff hasn't been assigned properly yet. So I'm just going to select this geometry here. Okay, and this is wall geometry. So I want to select all of this. G, X, to over here, and scale that down by a quarter, right? G, X, 0.25, just to move it over so it's overlapping the necessary texture. So now you see it's having the same texture map as all these other pieces of the wall. So it's all correct now. Okay, and then I would do the same thing for this one, this wall piece here. Okay, select everything here. Oops. And G, X. Okay, and then G, X, to just overlap that spot. All right, does that hopefully make sense? I know it's confusing. I feel like we kind of rushed through that a little bit. Please kind of review this video. All the steps are here. If you have any confusion, just kind of review this in preparation of your submissions. We've walked through the unwrapping process. We've walked through setting up UVs. We've the only thing we haven't really touched is how to texture like this desk, but we looked at the monkey head. So if you review last week's lesson on exporting our UVs and all that, we can do that. I will touch on one last thing. So we have Substance Painter. We have a program called 3D Coat. We have other programs where we can do texture painting. They're dedicated texture painting programs. Sorry, guys. We have dedicated texture painting programs, and we can always use those as well. Once we have a UV unwrapped mesh, we're kind of good. And so we can basically export that UV unwrapped mesh and then texture it in another program, and then bring the texture maps that we created back out of that program. So we'll quickly just look at that process. So I'm going to take this desk. I'm going to go File, Export FBX, and selected objects only. I'll call this desk, desk.fbx. Export that. Okay, so I could either export as FBX or an OBJ. Either or is fine. I'm going to go to a program here called 3D Coat. This is what I have my third year students using. There's also, of course, Substance Designer. The process is going to be similar, but you'll have to research how to import a UV mapped mesh into Substance Designer or Substance Painter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to Paint UV Mapped Mesh. I'll go to my file folder here, and I'll navigate to where I saved that, the desk.fbx. I'll open that. It's going to ask me how big do I want the texture to be. I want it to be pretty small, so we'll make it 512 by 512. Go ahead here and hit OK, and we have our desk here. And now we can go in and we can paint directly onto it in here. This is a little bit more sophisticated, so it allows you to paint like normal map information and, you know, glossiness and metalness and all this kind of stuff. But for our purposes, we only want the diffuse texture. So I can turn off the normal contribution here. There's a little orb up top. I can turn off the glossiness up here as well. And then I can just go in and basically paint with in a way that's very similar to Photoshop. You can use your square brushes to make things bigger and smaller, but I can navigate it, I can rotate it in 3D, and I can change my color here. Like so. Okay, so that's basically it, guys. You know, if you're still iffy on how to do Substance, or sorry, how to upload stuff to Sketchfab, please review the video that I shared. That will kind of help clarify that process. And beyond that, I look forward to seeing where you guys land with this. If you have any questions, please let me know. But other than that, good luck, guys. Have fun, and yeah, I look forward to seeing where you guys wind up. Okay, cool, guys. And then, sorry, last step, if I want to, I would go File, Export Object and Textures. I don't need to export the geometry because I already have it, but the texture. And I'll just do it like this because it's just easier. New folder, call it desk. I know we're a little over time here, guys. Desk. Okay, and then I'll go ahead here, and I just want to export the diffuse actually. So close each of these. Just the diffuse map I want, and I'll go ahead in here and hit export. Okay, so that will export that. Happens really fast. And now I can select this, and where it says base color, I can click on that. I can go for image texture, open, go for my desk, and then I get that desk diffuse. And I can open that, and you see that texture that I painted there will now be applied here. Okay. Okay. But you'll see my UVs are kind of messed up because it's taking whatever I set for my UVs. So I temporarily move this outside my UV space. So ideally I will have moved this back into the desired position, you know, chosen a quadrant somewhere. Like here. And then done my texture painting within that within that space. But that's it, guys. That's how we can kind of do our textures. That's how we can have this and our floor and our wall, right? And different things. If we tab.
Gavin, can I show you what I have so far?
Yeah, sure. So, and we have them all here in the same UV texture space. But ideally, we would be using the same Atlas texture. Okay, so we have to go in and then paint on our Atlas texture and make sure that this is the top of our desk. This is the side of our desk, you know. So the proper texture is aligned to our geometry here. All right, so that's basically it, guys. Okay, so we can wrap here, and I apologize for going so long, but I hope hopefully that was helpful. So Stephen, I'll help you. I do have another meeting shortly, but I'm happy to connect with you outside of class time to kind of go through issues, and absolutely your TAs will be able to help you, and your classmates. There's some classmates who are pretty like adept with this, so make sure you check those channels as well. But I'm absolutely happy to help. All right, guys. So I'm going to close down this stream. I will jump back to the Google Meet for a bit, and then we'll go from there. All right. Take care, everybody. And just double check what the weekly activity is. It is to texture at least one asset from your scene, and then put that into your and then so you're started. So like, as you are kind of working towards texturing the things in your diorama, you're gonna have to do it anyways. So it's just a way to get a little bit of a head start. All right, guys, take care.